This is a record fine. Can you put it in perspective for us in terms of what the Treasury just accomplished in DOJ?
Yeah, I think this is a big moment for the crypto industry, and it's a big moment for Treasury. I think there's been a lot of interest in cryptocurrencies for a variety of reasons. But you heard Attorney General Merrick Garland come out today and reference the two actions that the DOJ has taken on FTX and now on Binance, and you've heard the Deputy Secretary there. And what Treasury is basically saying is these exchanges, these cryptocurrencies are no different from doing business with a traditional bank. They're not subject to special rules, and they will be treated in the same way that any other financial institution will be treated when it comes to sanctions, when it comes to anti-money laundering. So that changes a little bit of how the industry, I'm sure, is going to think of itself going forward and how it's going to think about some of its obligations under these regulations as time goes by.
And as we talk about some of this illicit funds going to Hamas, we also have, Joe, we haven't even spoken about it today, but all day we've been waiting whether or not this agreement will actually see light of day when it comes to the hostages being held by Hamas. And President Biden discussed this possible hostage deal earlier.
We're now very close, very close. We could bring some of these hostages home very soon. But I don't want to get into the details of things because nothing is done until it's done. And we have more to say, we will, but things are looking good at the moment.
Nancy, he doesn't want to get ahead of it before it's done, but we've seen the president come out now a few times, a number of occasions the past 24, 48 hours, really saying and trying to allude that he does feel like this is going to happen. What do you make of the White House messaging? Does that tell you that this is likely going to happen in terms of this hostage negotiation?
I think that President Biden is usually very direct with what he tells people. And so, yes, I do think that we should take it seriously that this is a strong possibility if he's saying that with a bunch of reporters, in the Roosevelt room, as we just saw there in the clip. But really, this is slightly out of his hands. This is something that the Israeli government and not Netanyahu's cabinet has to approve. This is something that is being negotiated at the highest levels of the Israeli government with Hamas leadership. The government of Qatar is also involved. And so, I think that the Biden administration would love a humanitarian pause and would love to have some hostages back so they feel like they have more control over what is happening with the Israel-Hamas war. But it is largely out of their hands and being negotiated by these other governments.
To what extent, then, can the White House control the optics on this? The president's heading off to Nantucket for Thanksgiving. Is this an announcement that will come from overseas? And I ask you that because the president's dealing with some real concerns among young people, among progressives who are calling for this to happen. And he could have quite a bit to gain politically by having his fingerprints on it.
Absolutely. But I think that it will be an announcement that will come, likely from Hamas and the Israeli government. It's just a question of whether or not this White House, as you alluded to, is able to capitalize on this moment, particularly if Hamas ends up releasing Americans who are held hostage there. That would be a big boon for the Biden White House. And the question is, he can always take questions in Nantucket. Does he come out and say something about it? Does it just look like a statement? What does it look like?
Right. And of course, we have to remember this deal is not over until we actually see these hostages. This is why these moments are so delicate. Dan, Benjamin Netanyahu, though, earlier said, quote, there is nonsense out there as if after the pause in fighting, we will stop the war. So it does sound like the Israelis want to continue the bombardment on Gaza even after they have this pause for a few days to have this hostage deal.
Yeah, certainly. I think the prime minister is trying to get across there the idea that the fighting will continue, that this is not a ceasefire per se, this is a pause. And I think that is probably important from the Israeli government's perspective because they don't want to give Hamas the indication that they are losing some resolve or something of that nature. So, a lot of messaging obviously around this, but I think the deal itself is going to be very important. And as Nancy said, it's going to be important not just for the U.S., not just for the people living in Gaza, but also for Israel and everything that's going to happen going forward and everything that we'll be watching very carefully going forward. So it'll be interesting to see how it all comes together, of course.